How's everyone doing out there? How is everyone doing out there? I'm going to give just a couple minutes, just in case. Sorry, let me turn that down. Just in case people wanted to tune in live. It's been a while since I've done a live because there's just a lot to keep up with. Wow, right? I mean, what a world. Yeah. So a couple things I just wanted to talk about, and it's going to be a little spicy, but I am not one to shy away from the spice, especially at a time like this. And at a time like this for me means I'm absolutely desperate. I'm gonna lose my house or my car, one or the other first. I'm actually going to go get some prices on what people will pay me for my car so that I don't lose my house first. But personally, I'm just gonna give you my personal stuff first, so you know where I'm at. I've been writing this Substack now for probably 2 years. I was reading an older Substack I did probably just over a year ago, and the introduction was so muddled. But at that time, I was still kind of like writing feverishly because I would write stuff and I would have to like rush to work, and the amount of time I actually had to spend trying to make sense of the world was a lot less. But I've been off work for over a year, I think now. I'm waiting for a hip replacement. I just got to see the surgeon 2 days ago. I've been waiting since February. February? No, I even before that. I mean, I've been to see the doctor on and off. Um, 5 years ago, I told the doctor I had an issue with my hip because I did something. I rolled my left ankle playing volleyball, and then I basically did the damage. That was in the fall. The next spring, I went and played beach volleyball fours, and I could tell I was doing some serious damage. What I did not realize is that I took I think it's the meniscus. I took it all out, so it's just like my hip and bone have been bone on bone for 5 years. And honestly, just because of the way the world was, if you remember 2020, how crazy everything went in 2020, I avoided going to hospitals. I was immediately saying no to the masks. Um, and, I've lost everything since then. We actually were like in pretty stable shape at that point. Like right at that point in time when everything went nuts, we were in the best financial position we'd been in since my wife and I got together, and things were looking up. Things were looking up, and then everything went to shit. And that's just my personal story. I pulled my kids out of school because I wasn't going to let them put masks on my kids. I knew the masks were bullshit early on. It was pretty clear there was a lot of stuff that was not adding up or making sense early on. And so from that point on, I began in earnest trying to ask what's going on in the world. What on earth is happening in the world right now? And so at that point in time, I wasn't writing my Substack. I wasn't even writing. I dabbled a little bit on my spare time because I did have a lot that I like to think about, but I didn't spend a significant amount of time invested in doing that kind of stuff. But in the last year, I've had a lot more time to sit down and try to actually write my thoughts out. And the wonderful tool of AI helps people to, it really is a fantastic learning tool. And I think a lot of people are unnecessarily afraid of it, but it is certainly a sign of the times. And what are the times right now? I mean, Trump is threatening to go to war in Iran. Artificial intelligence is still exploding. Everybody's saying we don't know exactly how it works, but we're going to put all of our faith into it, and we're going to attach it to all our missile defense systems, and just like we're going to surveil everybody with it. And I mean, like the kinds of things that are being said about this technology that nobody even really understands how it works. And like that's to say that they don't understand the mechanics. They do understand the mechanical way that it works. They understand that if you put all of these transformers and GPUs together, and you have this kind of like propagation of informational element. They pump a lot of information into these machines, and then they ask it to kind of like pattern match. I wasn't planning on talking about that right now. I've talked about that plenty of times. In fact, that's what I read about. But today, I didn't. All of that stuff has brought me to religion, to thinking about religion, because a lot of people in the modern world have discounted the value of religion, and they tried to bury it. In fact, there was this speech by Mark Carney just a couple days ago. Um, I'll post a video of it below this after, and he basically said, Canada's not a Christian. Our values aren't Christian values. They're something else, and it's like he's basically saying, oh, our values are diversity, and diversity is our strength, and pluralism, and he says it all in French, and it's all kind of, his French is not great. Not that I have better French. My French is terrible. I don't even speak French. I know a few keywords, sure, and phrases, being Canadian. But I do know also that every year, at least for the past few years, I've gone to the Remembrance Day ceremonies, and it just so happens that there's a priest there, and people are constantly saying things about God, and I wonder who Mark Carney thinks the God is that they're talking about, but it's the Christian God. Hint, Mark Carney, person who does not understand anything about Christianity, even though he's a Catholic, but he's a Catholic, Vatican II Catholic, believes in synodality, I suppose. And synodality is this kind of idea out of Vatican II where they're basically trying to say all religions have some value, and they're all kind of the same, and they all kind of come from the same place, even though they don't explicitly say that. But they're saying that we can learn things from all these other religions, and the express purpose of this synodality movement was to encourage a kind of harmony across cultures and across religions and across peoples. Like the Dalai Lama would get together with the Pope, and they would all talk about how they can make the world a better place, right? And that's kind of like how we got the UN. I mean, the synodality was kind of like a nod to the UN, really. It was this idea that humanity needed to work together for our common problems to find common solutions. But no one thing was any better than any other, even though, we had this Carrie Bowler woman who was just on a panel for religious freedom by I'm not sure if it was the Department of Justice. I am kind of like writing about that right now because she came out and she basically said to a couple rabbis on the panel, and Shabbos rest him, Kestamom. What a piece of work he is. He's like the new Ben Shapiro, but like with less self-awareness. He's amazing. Anyway, they had this working group on religious freedoms in the United States, and Bowler pointed out she was basically trying to get these rabbis to explain, because the main focus of this thing and the reason that it's been so important lately is because of all the rise of anti-Semitism, right? So she basically says, well, what is anti-Semitism? And they said, well, anti-Semitism is when you're an anti-Zionist. And so they're attaching anti-Semitism to a political idea. And that political idea is the idea that the Jewish people were given the land of Israel by God in the Abrahamic covenant. And that's why it's their right to have this country in the middle of all these hostile territories right there in the Middle East. And they will tell you that it's the only Jewish country and it's surrounded by Muslim countries. And why do Christians get countries and why do Muslims get countries, but why don't Jewish people get some? You have a double standard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But see, when it comes to Catholicism and what Carrie Bowler said to these rabbis, and she actually did something. She brought this Rabbi Shapiro, who I've been looking at, who is a anti-Zionist rabbi. And you need to understand that when it comes to Jewish people, there are Jewish people that are anti-Zionism, and there's Jewish people that are just kind of like most are pro-Zionism, but there's some that are anti-Zionism. But again, it depends what you mean by Zionism. So these guys defined it as, if you say anything bad about the state of Israel, you're holding a double standard, and that double standard is anti-Zionist, it's anti-Semitic inherently. So if you believe in a belief system that says that, this is really important, okay? Because they're arguing a religious position to a political reality. Zionism is a political reality. And in fact, when Carrie Bowler says that Catholics are not for Zionism, what she's trying to say is that the kind of Zionism that says that all of that land, the Greater Israel Project kind of landmass, the land that was given to the Jewish people by covenant with Abraham, God gave to Abraham, and it's in the Tanakh, or the Torah, the Old Testament, the first half of the Christian Bible. And she says that the Vatican, Roman Catholicism, I'm a Roman Catholic, we reject Zionism. But she's really not using her words properly. The point is that she brought up this rabbi who is also an anti-Zionist, and he wrote a book against Zionism. And Shabbos Kestenbaum says, "Oh, well, you're quoting this guy that's like, he's largely disenfranchised because he's an anti-Zionist. And so, since the majority of Jewish people identify as Zionists, even though that definition is like all over the place, it just means that do Jews have a right to have a homeland, and should it be specifically the land of Israel?" Again, that was a political decision that was made after World War II and after the horrific attempt of genociding the Jewish people by Hitler. We all know this. This is the one thing we all know about the Second World War. Because there's so many efforts to remind us about the Holocaust, Hitler, Holocaust, Hitler, Holocaust, Hitler. And if you ever wonder why we never hear anything about communism and all the people that communism killed, it's because we spend all this time talking about Hitler and Holocaust, because there's somebody that actually spends money to get people to remember that particular part of it. And then, there's a lot of wealthy Jewish people who do that, and it's their priority and it's their prerogative to do that. They can do. Nobody's saying they can't do that. But just so we're clear, Zionism was something, I think, was his name, Theodore Herzl. He had this kind of project that he brought to the British and said, I have this idea where I want to bring the Jewish people back to their homeland. And after the horrors of World War II, it seemed like a good time to do that. And there was already some settlers there, some Jewish settlers, and they basically parceled off a part of the land and gave that land to, and they encouraged more Jewish people to go there so that they might have a state that would stick up for their rights and their priorities and Jewish beliefs and values, and that they could have a place, since they've been persecuted all over Europe, and there was the pogroms and all this stuff is true. Like, I'm not saying any of that is not true. And it's like, why shouldn't the Jewish people, if they identify as Jewish, have a homeland? They should. If I had to say so, I'd say, like, I'm probably pro the concept of Zionism. I am pro Jewish people having a homeland, and I'm for Israel. I would actually love to visit Israel. And what it always comes down to this, oh, well, do you want the Muslims to take over? And I'm like, no, I don't want the Muslims to take over, because I think Islam is far more oppressive of a religious ideal. It is. It's tyrannical in nature. But the part that people don't know about Zionism is the part that goes back to this kind of concept of the third temple and whether or not it should be built, and the Mashiach, and which is their Messiah who has not yet come. And so you need to understand that there's this eschatological worldview, which means like the beginning, a kind of like an end times kind of scenario that they believe in Judaism. It's largely a byproduct of Talmudic and Kabbalistic, mystical kind of Judaism, which is some of the most popular stuff, which kind of like blended into Orthodox Judaism. The point is, there's all different kinds of Judaism. There's all different kinds of Islam. There's all different kinds of Christianity, including Catholicism and Protestantism. And there's all these different isms that you can think about, but there's only one Jesus Christ, and everybody knows that. And what Kerry is saying, Kerry Bowler was trying to say, was that the Vatican says that there's only one Jesus Christ. And he was indeed the Messiah that came to the Jewish people, that was a Jewish person, half. So he was half Jewish and he was half God. Because Catholics believe in the virgin birth. So if they believe in the virgin birth, that means that Mary became pregnant by means other than being touched by a man. Now, Jews reject this, and that's okay. That's their prerogative to do so. But there's a lot of, there's a lot of history there where an animosity where Jewish people who have rejected the Messiah have been making their case for rejecting the Messiah for centuries, and they had been protected by Catholics. But Catholics, I'm sure, from time to time get sick and tired. Maybe not even just Catholics, but Christians, and there was like a lot more Protestant Christianity in Europe. But there's also Eastern Orthodox. It's all very messy. The point is that Kerry Bowler was saying that as a Christian, I'm anti-Zionist. So what was she really trying to say? She was trying to say that she's anti this greater Israel project, Zionism. She's against Zionism, which means Judaism that wants to take over the whole landmass because they believe it was given to them by God. And Christians reject that covenant. They believe in Reformation theology. Now, a lot of people will insult Christianity and they will call it replacement theology. It's not replacement theology. It's Reformation theology. Okay, so because the Jewish people that existed at that time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the what were they called, the Herodians. So these were kind of like Jewish people that they worked for the king of that time, King Herod. And the Sadducees were the priests that spent time in the temple and kind of like took care of matters in the temple. And the Pharisees were just like the ones that would kind of go out and they would be like the bishops. But not all, but some of them roundly rejected Jesus because they said he's not doing what we are expecting our Messiah to do. We were expecting our Messiah to come and to be a warlord and to lead us to battle against everyone that doesn't believe that we are the one true faith. And when they believe, and he's not supposed to be God either, by the way, that's really important. They believe that he can't be. Oh my gosh, what's the word? God can't be a man. There's a word for it. It's slipping my mind right now. I'm kind of tired and frustrated and stressed and everything. But they believe that God couldn't be a man, and the Messiah, the Mashiach, is supposed to come to Israel. And whether or not the third temple has to be built first, that's up for debate. But they believe that the Mashiach is going to lead them in a battle against everybody that doesn't believe in their version of religion, which is in the Tanakh, and is supported by arguments in the Talmud and all these other things where it's just years and years of debate over. First and foremost, the most important thing that you really need to realize is that the Jewish people, if they say I am religiously Jewish, are saying we reject Jesus. That's all they're saying. Okay. They're saying we do not believe Jesus is the Messiah. So, of course, all of their holy books and debates and things like that have nothing to do with the impact that Jesus had on society. And they were pissed about the impact that Jesus had on society. They were so pissed, they started a rebellion against Rome because they couldn't wait any longer. But people would come and they'd say, "I'm the Messiah, I'm the Messiah, and I'm going to lead you. I'm a prophet, and I see what's going to happen. I'm going to lead you in rebellion against Rome." And they did that one too many times, and Rome basically slaughtered a whole bunch of Jewish people in Jerusalem and destroyed the Second Temple. And then, of course, history comes. Islam comes along several hundred years later, conquers that area, and builds the Dome of the Rock on the foundation stones of the West Wall. I believe that's what's called the West Wall, and that's basically the wall that is the outside wall of what is supposed to be the place for the third Jewish temple. And the third Jewish temple is going to be the place that is built when and everybody will basically say, "Oh, we were wrong all along. You Jewish people had it right all along." And and you guys are the best, and there's lots of other stuff that gets said about it, but like this is just like this. I'm not insulting anyone. I'm just talking ideas. I'm telling you what's happening right now, because it is. So they believe that their eschatology, their end times narrative, is that they're gonna basically most of the diaspora is going to again reconvene in Jerusalem, in Israel, the Greater Israel Project. They need all that because everybody's going to come back to Israel, and then they're going to rebuild the third temple, and then basically they're going to bring an era of peace. And I've said this multiple times. If you believed that you were going to heal all disease, you were going to end all strife and hunger and war, and you were going to bring an era, 1,000 years of peace. Isn't that something worth striving for? I mean, it should be. It should be. Wouldn't okay, like, yes, some people, there's gonna be a war and some people are gonna die, but eventually people are gonna realize, "Ah, ha, 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 you guys were right all along." And then all the all the kind of like studying and all the things they've been doing for 2,000 years will finally come to fruition, and everybody will realize you guys were right all along and we're just a bunch of dummies. We're so sorry. Thank you for all the peace, which sounds great. Right? But there's some things that have to happen. They have to rebuild the third temple. The Mashiach has to come. There has to be a war of everybody versus the geographical landmass of Israel. Okay, so Carrie's anti that. She's anti that thing because that has been now because of the the war that happened in Gaza and like 2 years of just like this relentless bombing. And again, immediately after October 7th, 2023, I was just like, whoa, this is horrific. Disavow, disavow. I am not a Hamas guy. I wasn't even like a Palestinian supporter guy back then. I knew very little about it. I knew some, but I knew very little about it. I basically just said, Israel, I did the talking points. Israel's the only Western country in the Middle East, and it's surrounded by hostile peoples, because it is. I mean, like, it is. The Jewish people believe in their end time scenario, and the Islamic people, it's kind of like it's the opposite, where they say that no, they're gonna. I think Jesus comes down and Muhammad comes down or something, and I'm a little bit less read up on Islamic, but it's because you'd think I live in Canada and we've imported all of these people that they have different belief systems from us, the ones that Mark Carney says that are equally the same as Canadian values. And somehow we're supposed to align artificial intelligence by believing that there can be all these different, like anybody's God can be God, and all values are the same. And Canada is not a Christian country. Well, what did we fight for in the Second World War? I forget what we fought for in the Second World War. Was it specifically to rescue the Jewish people from Hitler? No. No, 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 no. That wasn't it. No, no. It was because the West had a value system that believed in individual human rights, didn't go for the totalitarian things that took over, like the fascist things that took over Japan and Italy and even Russia, which is Eastern Orthodox and that had dealt with the communist uprising that killed millions of people, but then they were still ready to fight because there was still kind of like the leftover of Christendom and the Christian ethos. See, I think that's even like why people thought that they would be able to have this wonderful utopian society in the first place is because, well, everybody they knew was actually kind of a decent person. And so why not overthrow the people they saw as opulent? They were convinced that the people in charge were like these opulent, awful people that treated them like secondary citizens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was all kind of like a grievance. Marxism was a grievance kind of thing against to overthrow rulers so that they could bring a kind of a utopian world that was largely something that was envisioned in Christian communities and worked towards a Christian community. So like they killed lots of people that wouldn't conform, but still there was this kind of like brotherly thing that held it all together in Russia. And when they engaged that brotherly thing, they were still fighting for human rights, even though communism was taking a really bad way about getting there. They were still kind of really fighting for human rights, and so they didn't want oppressors. They wanted to throw off oppressors, and the fascistic and the Nazi and the National Socialist and the fascism of Japan that went into China and did a whole bunch of damage, and the Italian fascists, they got together with Germany and they were all like, no, we're going to create a new utopia. But one of the things, Hitler was obsessed with was getting rid of just people that weren't good enough to exist in that new utopia. His inspiration was actually from eugenics, which came from the West and the Brits. And there's a lot of people practicing eugenics, which is this idea that you could rid the world of these unsavory elements that tended to corrupt the world. Why do I say this? Carrie Bowler was basically saying that she is anti-Zionism that acts in a way that it can get rid of all these unsavory elements and bring about a new utopia on Earth for its own reasons without caring about the rights of the people that it was going after. And it was using this kind of excuse. But again, I'm not saying anything about October 6th, but excuse me, October 7th and October 6th. October 7th, I'm not saying anything about that. I thought it was terrifying and terrible, and I supported the Israeli army going in there and getting some of those people, but it seemed after a little while, after about a year and a half, it started to seem kind of excessive. And watching Piers Morgan, it was like there was people coming on the program that were defending the position of Israel and continuing to go after what they called Hamas. There was one clip in particular where a woman said, we've got a list of all these people of Hamas and we're not going to stop until we get them. And Piers says to the woman, yeah, but do you know how many innocent civilians have been killed along the way, women and children, which is the typical line? And she's like, well, no, we're not keeping track of that. We don't know how many people we kill that we don't care about. We only know about the people that we want to kill that we do care about, which is Hamas. We identified them as Hamas. And that right there is the mentality that the strong should be able to go after the weak, even if some of the weak are in the way. Right? Excuse me. The strong should be able to go out. I screwed that up. The strong should be able to go after the undesirable elements, even if some of the people who have presumably not much to do with the conflict get in the way. But then again, you would hear people in Israel say, well, and I'm not saying all, but definitely some would say, well, they're all kind of guilty for having Hamas. They voted them in, and so they deserve what they get, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Americans have made that argument. Canadians, I suppose, to some degree, made that argument. British have made that argument. Whenever you see you get somebody identified as the other, and this person is stopping you from having a free society, it seems okay to go and get them. But there was a different ideal. It was a Christian ideal that came out of Britain and the United States and Canada, and that was what allowed, and certain countries in Europe, and that was what allowed them to maintain this idea that we are ethically superior in the way that we're doing these things. We measured it against, we're not like those bad people, we're good people. So when we drop a bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I probably brutalized that. Nagasaki, oh my gosh. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Anyway, I'm not going to get stuck on that. We did it because we were good people and they were bad people. And we had to teach the bad people lessons so that the good people could prevail. And what made them good was their Christian ethics. They weren't going to tyrannize people with ideas like fascism and National Socialism. They weren't going to rid society of the elements that made it unclean in the eyes of the people that were in charge. And that's kind of like what, it started to look like Israel was doing to Gaza, and to the casual observer, all the people standing up and fighting, saying like Palestine has a right to exist, but they would also, like, a lot of them would say from the river to the sea, and that's terrifying because that's just kind of like the opposite. It's the opposite, equal and opposite reaction to what Israel was doing. So they're basically creating a scenario where now everybody was pissed at them, and then that drove a rise in what they call anti-Semitism, which is just basically people saying, hey, like, cut it out. But because of the blowback of the things that Israel was doing in Gaza, Jewish people in the diaspora were being affected, and people were speaking harshly at Jewish people in the diaspora, and all these people that were imported, that are Muslim, are obviously going to stand for the Palestinian rights. They were basically saying, you need to stop, and Israel's like this, they're the great Satan, and like all this kind of, like, there was a sentiment going around that Israel is a colonial Western country in the Middle East, and it was trying to kill these poor innocent people, of which there are over 1 billion. So Carrie Lynn Bowler was basically saying, I'm anti that. I'm anti-killing innocent people, is what she was trying to say, because the Vatican's current position is they are okay with the political Israel, but they're not okay with the religious Israel. They reject that, and they support a two-state solution. They say, okay, you guys are already there. Not much we can do about that, but Palestine should have its own state. And this is something a lot of people have been endorsing. And so the question then becomes, is that anti-Semitism? So she should have asked if that is anti-Semitism. Basically, anybody that's against what's happening there, when it seems like it's kind of like over its skis, and being a little bit too critical and harsh, and a little bit too fast and loose with the bombs. And there was also reports of, innocents being killed when they're trying to get food, and all this stuff just kept coming out and coming out, and people were just like freaking out because of it. And so I suppose she wore a Palestinian pin or something too, which, that's going to anger some people. I don't think she should have done that, but that she claims, Catholics as a whole. So now she's speaking for all Catholics. I don't think so. I think, again, I'm pro-Israel being able to have a home. It's already there. Like, what are we going to do? What I'm not for is the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, and the rebuilding of the Third Temple, because that implies, and I'm against it for reasons that I think are pro-Jewish, because if they try to do that, people will turn on them. Muslims will turn on them. And like they say they don't want that. So if you don't want that, then why would you do the very thing that would provoke so much more of that? And it's like, there's some other things I wanted to say, but I feel like I've rambled too much. But, like, to be an anti-Zionist is not to be anti-Semitic, because you're actually for uh, the safety of Jews in the diaspora, which is about half. There's like 7.5 million in Israel and 7.5 million in the diaspora, so outside of Israel, predominantly in the United States, like New York, Florida, and then there's a decent community here in Canada, and then like scattered. But like it all comes down to what is a Zionist? And a Zionist basically is a person that believes that the land of Israel was given to them by God, which is why they keep saying Judeo-Christian, 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 given to them by God. And we can get into we can get into dispensationalists and Christian Zionism and evangelicals and the effect that all these people are having in their connection to the military industrial complex, which is a little bit dark, but you can see it now because they want. I mean, like, so for the people that believe like in the rapture, they believe that if the war kind of goes to Israel, the Israeli or the Jewish eschatology kind of like go they go and they have that battle there, they're going to be whisked off to heaven, and then they don't care about the Jewish people left behind, right? So they're basically using them as pawns to bring their own kind of like rapture to themselves and to bring Jesus, who they believe is going to come back. But then to the Jewish people, they don't believe Jesus is going to come. They believe the Mashiach is going to come, who's not God. He is a man that is going to be of the line of David, that's going to lead them to victory in battle. But that's a very materialist way to look at the world right now, you know? And because we have all that materialism going for us in that sense, because there is no divine entering the world, in fact, it's very kind of like severed kind of idea of like this idea of it's like a spiritualism without a spiritual element that we recognize as Christianity, which is like the divine, like the creator coming into our reality and revealing to us that the way we were treating each other was kind of crappy and we need to fix it. That's why Christianity was a reformation and not a replacement. Was reformation. They were doing a lot of things wrong. They were worshiping at the temple. They were making sacrifices. They want all that back, and they want everybody else to make sacrifices at the temple. But it's like they're expecting a man, just like a regular man, or maybe some variety of like some kind of like machine god. I mean, maybe that's what Jeffrey Epstein was all about. Maybe they're expecting to find the perfect set of genes to cook up the Messiah, the Mashiach, in a lab. And so this perfect man is going to come. This perfect Israeli specimen or Jewish specimen is going to come, and he's going to lead them all in battle. Who knows? But I know that there's all this weird stuff happening around it, like the red heifer, and like there's people that have plans to build the third temple. Like all of this is objectively true. You can't deny that it's true because you can like look it up. It's happening. And people are like, "What? No, that's crazy." It's like, yeah, maybe it is kind of crazy, but it doesn't mean that they're not doing it. So when people are against that, that's what they're against. They're against this kind of like immanentizing the eschaton, bringing about the end times. And it's different in Islam, and it's different in Christianity, and it's different in Judaism. But it's all about creating this conflict, provoking this conflict right there in the Middle East. Now, Christianity says nobody knows the day or the time, and you need to like chill. Don't do that stuff. Don't do that stuff. If you push that kind of stuff, bad things will happen. Only God knows the time and the date of the second coming of Christ. And if you try to force it, that will end poorly, and that's what a lot of Christian Zionists do, and apparently now there's Roman Catholic Zionists, and I've been doing this whole deep dive and all this kind of stuff, and I've got a really long Substack I've been trying to finish now for weeks, and it's really involved and goes into a lot of these details, and it will be way less rambling than I am, even though it will be covering like a whole bunch of crap. And it feels like things are going faster and faster. Like Donald Trump, I guess, yesterday said, "Oh, release the alien files." And let me tell you something. Everybody's freaking out. They're like, "Oh, it's a cover up for Epstein." I think Epstein, a lot of what he was doing had to do with kind of like this technology that you might consider to be cosmic technology. But it's all like related around a belief system, and he believed himself to be kind of like superior. That's some of the stuff that's definitely come out. He believed himself as a Jewish person to be superior, and there was attempts to like play it off like, oh no, he's working for Russia, or he didn't even like Israel because he said this one time he's like, I don't want to go there for that meeting. I mean, the attempts to distance themselves from Jeffrey Epstein are like, it's like all of these things that keep getting done by people. It just reeks of guilt. Do you know what I mean? Like it reeks of guilt. So every time they try to say, no, I don't know. And then, but there's all this evidence. It just reeks of guilt. And I'm saying, judge not lest you be judged, and let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And all that good stuff. And also that every single human being on the planet, regardless of race, color, or creed, is born with what is called Imago Dei, which I believe is the soul. It's the connection, the Holy Spirit, the thing that connects us to the Creator, who entered our reality via Mary and became God. A man on earth that created a scenario where it led to the greatest fermentation of human rights ever known. And that was what Christendom's gift to the world was. And we should have seen it because it acts a lot different than all the other ones. And, just to deny it because of like out of spite just seems so weird to me. But I mean, people do it. Not to say that there are not Jewish people that are called Messianic Jews that are, again, I would say this with great enthusiasm. Messianic Jews are some of the best Christians out there because they know the talk and they know the Christian Bible, and they have they just do it better than most Christians. Of course, because they're like God's chosen people. They were God's chosen people, but they kept messing up and they kept, corrupting things and worshiping false idols and just falling away from God and worshiping materialism. And when God came into our reality, he made us kind of like aware of the fact that there is more that we don't understand. My kingdom is not of this earth. My Father's kingdom is not of this earth. So he's saying that, like, he's saying there's more. And there is more, obviously. But if you believe in the materialist view of it, that there is no such thing as a God man, well, then you worship different things. You just pick different things to believe in. You worship different things. A lot of people worship evolutionism and evolution as like the only thing that makes sense, and just add time and sprinkle in some abiotic material, which nobody knows where it came from, and boom, humanity. And like apparently it happens everywhere in the universe because it's so big, and that's why there must be aliens. So if aliens come, there's nothing to stop humanity from worshiping the aliens. So I hope that you get that through line. Anyway, I think I rambled enough. Look, Israel, as it was created, was done so under a political auspices. It was done so because horrible things happened in the Second World War to the Jewish people specifically, and of course they should have a homeland. I suppose I'm a Zionist. I'm pro the idea of Israel having a homeland. I am against the idea of them using that piece of land to bring forth the end times. Seems like a bad idea. I don't know. But then again, no one can know the time or the place, and I suppose something's going to happen because there's a lot of threads all kind of converging, the biodigital convergence happening around that area, and I don't know what it all means, but it's getting weird out here. So let's just do one together. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. You are an individual soul having experience, and you right now are meeting at the intersection between the material and the mystical or metaphysical, however you want to put it. And welcome to the singularity, I suppose. Elon Musk says we're in it. We're not on the horizon. We're in it. And a lot of people are worshiping AI, and a lot of people are going to worship the aliens. And no matter what any of those things are, I urge you to reconsider that none of it makes sense without the Logos, without Jesus Christ, without what he revealed to us. And that if you start idolizing Israel, if you start like the dispensationalists and evangelists do, they're basically using them as sacrificial lambs so that they might get to heaven. That seems not very Christian to me. And using the military industrial complex to do it, which is so dark. It's so dark. The world is entering a really dark era right now, and I can't even afford to live through it the way things are going, so I have to go sell my car. Okay, God bless you guys. I have asked for assistance before. I put my PayPal link on a couple of my posts and things that I thought were really good, and they never went anywhere. And I'm begging at this point. I'm gonna lose everything, and I don't know. And seems kind of worse that we're all gonna lose everything if we don't straighten this thing out. So I'm just trying. I'm just trying to keep helping people see the bigger picture for what I can. Okay. God bless you guys. Bye.